So welcome everyone this evening. I'm going to get started with a few housekeeping items. My name is Christine McWilliam, and I also have my colleague Jennifer Sims on. So as I had said earlier, if anyone has any tech support questions, one of us will be happy to give you a hand. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home and endeavor to move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I'd like to remind people that we are open, although we are still working remotely. So please call us if you should need any of our services or need to connect with us for any reason. We really appreciate your time this evening. We know that the virtual platform space is getting a little crowded nowadays, but we really appreciate the fact that you've come out this evening, taken time out of your evening to join us. So also with that being said, please let us know if you have any further questions or have any extra feedback for us on how we can improve these. We do have future webinars coming up monthly as we've been kind of running for the past year or so. So please check back the Assant Cafe or your emails for information on those ones coming up. Just like to remind people once again, we are recording and it will be available after to view on our Assant Cafe. So please check back there if for some reason you'd like to revisit this. As I had said earlier, comments are anonymous in the Q&A section. You have that capability, but also please feel free to use the chat. That is the way that you'll be interacting with our presenter this evening. So right now, people living with dementia need support more than ever. These are challenging times and our needs are great. Our services are free of charge, and we're asking that if you're able to help more families receive the support they need, to please donate, and there will be an opportunity at the end of this presentation, as well as you can always give our office a phone call. And thank you for your continued support. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker for the evening, and then she will take it away. So Arlene Hewen is our Regional Lead of Client Services and Programs for the Edmonton Regional Office at the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories. She holds a bachelor degree of physical education from the University of Alberta, has training in adult education, and has worked for the Society for 21 years. During her time with the Society, Arlene has done over 600 family visits, facilitated over 250 support groups. The main focus of her work is to provide education and support to individuals living with dementia and their care partners. Making presentations to audience is also an important aspect of Arlene's work. Arlene is a mother of a teenage son and 2 fur babies in the form of dogs. So Arlene, I will close my screen off and I will let you take it away for us.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Christine. And welcome everybody. And I think I actually saw someone from Washington, so even out of the country. So welcome to everyone. Christine, just confirm that you can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So when we get started, I actually just have one apology. I usually have many. I have to tell you about all my dogs might be barking and things. I've developed a little tickle in my throat since I've been working at home, even though I'm in the office tonight. So I may have to stop. Water doesn't seem to work, so I'm just going to apologize now if I have to make a quick little stop if I get the little tickle in my throat. So a couple things about tonight's presentation. Some of you, when I start showing the presentation, you might think, oh, I've seen this before. And some of you probably have. But I want you to know that before you all sign off on me, that I have changed it a bit. Often people come to a program we call First Link Connection early on when their family member gets a diagnosis. And so we really talk about the disease in the early stage and give tips there. So tonight, though, because there's so many people on and of different stages, I will be trying to address every stage as we go through that. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that. As Christine said, the session is being recorded. So if I say something and you kind of miss it, always know that you'll be able to come back. I won't be able to cover all the challenges many of you are facing tonight, but I want you to think about the tips and techniques as transferable. If I give an example and use a tip or a technique, know that you can use it for many other things, and lots of things with, as all of you know, when you're helping support someone living with dementia, it really is about trial and error. So just keep trying. And again, remember to tweak any tips or techniques to fit your situation. You might have to change something because, I might say do this and you'll go, oh, it would work if I did that. Sometimes you have to change it due to your culture. But just remember, you can always tweak anything we talk about. And if at any point tonight you're like, I'd really like a more interactive session where I can actually ask the speaker, really direct questions and we can have a conversation back and forth. We do run a similar program. It's called First Link Connection, and I would encourage you to connect with your local office and they'll be able to help get you registered for that. And a couple last things before I actually really get going. A bit about my language, and I'm not going to swear, I promise. But when I'm talking, I may use the word Alzheimer's and then I may switch to dementia. Really, I'm talking about most dementias. So just know that and don't think I've all of a sudden just switched and talking about just Alzheimer's. I will be using the word care partner tonight. At the Alzheimer's Society, we use the word care partner, not caregiver. We all know that all of you, of course, are providing care. Sometimes the word is confused with professionals, and more so in our case, kind of similar to that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. We believe it takes a community to help support a person living with dementia, and everybody out there should be your partner as you help care for your family members. So when I'm referring to care partners, I'm referring to all of you who are on here tonight. We will be talking about what the medical world often refers to as behaviors. At the Alzheimer's Society, we like to refer to them as expressions of feelings and unmet needs. So when you hear me saying things like that, that's really what I'm referring to. As I mentioned earlier, we will be talking about early, middle, late, and end stage. So there's no exact science about it. And if you want more information on the different stages and the different types of dementia, we do have recorded live webinars on this platform. So at Sonic Cafe. And if you go in there, you'll be able to find them. Dr. Gibson did one a year ago, something like that. And he kind of walked through all of that. So I won't be spending the evening talking about that. So with that, I'm going to get started on my presentation. As many of you, I hope, know that this month is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. And one of their key kind of comments is knowledge changes everything. And so I'm really hoping today that you will gain some knowledge and be able to walk away with a tip or two that will help you in your situation. So I'm going to show you this picture, and you might be wondering why I'm showing you a picture of a highway. So many years ago, I just felt that there had to be a more simple way of talking about dementia than talking about plaques and tangles and things like that. So I just needed to figure out a way that it would work for my brain. And therefore, I've shared it with many people throughout the years that I've worked here, and it seems to work really well. So let's get started. We are going to talk about the brain in two different kind of ways. The first way will be for a person not with dementia, so all of us. And then I will talk about what might be happening with your family member. And when I say family member, it's family friend. So the person that you're helping support as well. So let's get started. So I want you to think of the brain like it's a highway system. You can see the highways. I've got 4 areas pulled up here right now. I've got communication, long-term memory, short-term memory, and reasoning. I want you to think that in our brain, we have this courier truck, which you can see, or courier van, I guess. And this courier driver goes up and down the highways, taking information from one section of your brain to another. So I am going to call on my colleagues who were just on to answer some questions so you guys can kind of see how we process, how our brain works. So if I ask my colleague Jennifer to tell me what she had for breakfast this morning, this is what happens. that courier driver is going to go up to the communication center, because communication isn't just us being able to talk, it's also us being able to receive information in and process it. So the courier driver went up, got my question, Jennifer, what'd you have for breakfast? Goes down. I want you to think of short-term memory like a two-drawer filing cabinet, because it only has to house recent information. And short-term memory, kind of in a clinic setting, we think about days worth of information, not weeks or months, but really those last days. So in this case, Jennifer's courier went down there. I want you to imagine there's a filer in there. The filer opens the drawer, it's going through all the files. Breakfast is a little ways back, because I know Jen worked today and did a few things at work and probably at home. So that she gets the filer, gives that courier driver the file, and the courier driver comes back, and that's where Jen tells us. Jen, go ahead.
I had toast with peanut butter.
Perfect. So you can see that's how we get information out of our short term. So when I go to our long-term memory isn't just like that little two-drawer filing cabinet. I want you to think of big files. And if you remember way back when, before everything became used with technology, our doctor's offices had those giant filing cabinets. So that's what I want you to think long-term memory is. And again, I always have to be really clear. This is an example. And so it's not like our brain really has 10-year filing cabinets. I've seen people do really cute things thinking that it did. But so it's just an example of, if you think of it this way, it'll help you understand dementia more. So if you imagine that we all have these 10-year cabinets. So if I ask my colleague Christine to tell me when she was born and where she was born, kind of the same thing happens. The courier has to go up, get my question. It's going to come down to long-term memory, and it's going to figure out where she keeps all of that birth information. Christine's going to go to the appropriate cabinet, get the information. Well, Christine actually won't, her filer will. Give it to the courier driver, and that driver is going to come back. And Christine, can you share your birth date and where you were born with us?
I was born May 12th, and I was born in Red Deer, Alberta.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Christine. So you can see that's how she would get that information. Now, when we think about reasoning, there are different ways to reason, and we've just kind of always talked about three different ones. So one example is an opinion. So if I ask an opinion question, again, to my colleague Jennifer, I might ask her, what's your opinion of internet banking? So you can start to get to see how our brain works, right? If a verbal question is asked, they got to go to the communication center, goes up to that center, gets the information, and then comes back and is able to tell us. So go ahead, Jen. What's your opinion of internet banking?
I love internet banking because I can take care of all of my bills without even taking my slippers off. So it's nice to be able to do that without leaving the house.
Right. So a couple things with that. So Jen answered the question, yes, I like it, or my opinion is I like it. The other key part is she said it's convenient. I don't even have to take my slippers off. Now, if Jen would have said, oh, I really like internet banking because my walls are blue, then we might go a little bit worried about that reasoning. But being convenient makes sense to all of us. The other important thing with when we think about an opinion is if I said to Jen, oh, I don't like internet banking, I don't feel it's safe at all. If I said to you, who's right, Arlene or Jennifer, hopefully all of you would say both of you are. And that's correct. We're always right because it's our opinion. Other people can disagree, but we're always right for us. Now, a different type of reasoning question is a processing question. So the same thing. My question to my colleague Christine is, how do you make a cup of coffee? If you're getting up in the morning at your house, what are the steps that you do? So again, that courier driver's got the question, goes over there, gets the information. And Christine, how do you make a cup of coffee? Share some of the steps.
Well, you would go to your kitchen. For me, I select a pod for my coffee pot, put the cup down and hit start.
Perfect. So that was about 4 or 5 steps. And some of you might go, oh, I use coffee grounds and I might, grind my beans. So you might add a couple steps, but for the most part, that processing, which is an activity of daily living, we probably all do in a very similar fashion. Now, if I ask my colleague Jennifer a higher level processing question or a higher level reasoning question, and that question could be something like, Jen, how do you take a two-story house, maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms, and downsize it into a 1 or 2 bedroom condo? Go. So you can see the courier driver went up, got that question, and has come back already. So now that they're taking the answer. So Jenna, how do you do that? What are the steps?
Oh, I feel like there's a lot of different things that you could do. I make a lot of lists. So I'd
Yeah.
probably go to all the rooms and make a list of what I need to do in them.
Perfect. So as you can see, Christine was able to tell us how she made coffee really quickly, because that's an activity of daily living, which means she probably does it, at least once a day, at least a couple times a week. The question I asked Jen, you could hear going, well, what do I like to do? I like to make lists, so I'm going to make some lists. Now, if we had the ability to ask everybody, which we don't, how would you downsize a house? There could be so many different ways of doing it. Some people might say, oh, don't make a list. What you want to do is, just go into each room and figure out some piles. And someone else might say, no, 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 no. So higher level reasoning is something we don't do often, and often has way more different steps, different ways of doing it. Whereas doing coffee, there's not a lot of different ways. So as far as, thinking of our brain, I want you to think of our brain like it's a highway system. And this courier driver goes up and down depending. Now, you saw I was asking questions to everybody, but our brain works the same way whether someone, looks at a book and has a thought about it and is like, oh, have I read that book? Even a thought can provoke that courier driver running around in the brain. If somebody asks somebody to do something but doesn't ask them to respond, then it'll send different areas of our brain. And I will be talking about those. But I want you to just think that's generally how we speak of this. So let's get to the part where everybody is really here for, which is, so now what happens for my family member? So the best way to understand, again, dementia, or maybe not the best, but the way we share it with families is now to think of this, is to think that your family member living with dementia, their brain works exactly the same way ours does. They just have some boxes that end up on the road. So one of the first areas for many, many of the dementias is that you notice short-term memory problems. So a typical example would be if I asked a family member living with dementia those exact same questions that I just asked my colleague. If my family member was in early stage, they might be able to go up and come down and answer exactly the same way, that I asked that my colleague Jennifer answered. She was able to get that question really, the question, and then get the answer really quick. So someone with really early stages might be able to do the same, and family members go, only it happens some days, but not every day. As the disease progresses, these boxes fall on there. So if you can imagine me asking maybe your family member, if they're more in the early or middle stage, what they had for breakfast, the courier driver is going to do the same thing. Go up, get that information, come down, but now it has to get around those boxes. So it'll take longer. And then they can eventually get there, get the file, and be able to go back. But again, takes longer. So here's one of your first tips for tonight. And that is, and I know everybody can do this. Some tips and techniques are harder, but this one is easy, and it's breathing. So when you ask a person living with dementia a question, give them some time. So what you should do during that time is, okay, I'm going to breathe. I'm going to make sure they've got time, let that courier drive around the box, and then be able to come and answer. And in the earlier stages, if we give them time, often they will be able to come up with that answer. However, as the disease progresses, so maybe now someone's more in the middle stage, maybe the middle to late stage. Now, if I ask them, again, any short-term memory question or trying to have a short-term conversation, But again, I'll just stick with the what did they have for breakfast. Actually, the same action stays the same, goes up, still has the boxes, so has to drive around the boxes, so it's going to take longer. But now you can see that boxes have actually hit that 2-drawer filing cabinet. So it's kind of like if I could take a 2-drawer filing cabinet and shake it above my head. The drawers would open, the papers, the folders would all come out. So now there's a really big mess there all over the floor. So when that courier driver gets down there and says, I need my breakfast file, the filer doesn't want to let you down. So they're looking through the paper and they're like, here's a file or folder that says breakfast and here's some food. And they put it in and the courier driver comes back. And let's imagine that your family member says, oh, I had turkey soup and a sandwich today. So now's the key part. And so this is another tip for everybody. Think of when somebody tells us an answer and we're like, that is not true. We tend to do, you saw my head, hopefully, and if you don't see my head, I'm shaking my head, no. Some of us go, Mom, I said breakfast. So we might repeat what we're saying, but we might sigh. Sometimes we roll our eyes. Sometimes we might just shake, scratch our head like, oh. So we really have to watch our nonverbal language. So that's another tip is watch your nonverbal language. When people living with dementia give you what they believe is correct information, but what you believe is incorrect information. And I want to just kind of quickly go back and kind of give you a different example or I guess share in our world what happens. So if I said to my colleague Jennifer, you did not have what, you said you had for breakfast, which I've already forgotten. So Jennifer didn't have that. If I said to Jennifer, look, I have a picture of you right here. It's got today's date stamped and you were at McDonald's. I think that's pancakes you had there. My guess is my colleague Jennifer would say, I was not there. I know I was home today and I know this is exactly what I had. But then imagine if I said, but look at, here's the receipt and it's got your signature. Now at some point, I'm probably going to cause my colleague Jennifer to start doubting herself. But when we doubt ourselves, it can come out in many different ways. We can express ourselves in many different ways. So I know my colleague Jennifer, and I think she's pretty assured of herself. So I think she would say, no, I don't think so, Arlene. I don't think that's right. I don't know how you got that picture. I don't know, you must have done some trick photography or something, but I know what I had. But if I kept pushing, I think my colleague Jennifer might just go, okay, fine. And so she's going to withdraw and close down. Now, I have some other colleagues who I think would actually want to argue this point. And so they might come back at me and say, no, you're doing something to me. You're trying to trick me. So again, but you can see there's so many different responses that any of us could have, where the key thing is what we really have to remember, that family member of yours went all the way down, got the file. We trust our files, they trust their files, and that's what they had. So unless health or safety is at risk, then my point or other technique to you is you don't actually have to correct that. So we live in a bit of a correcting world, but we actually don't have to correct that. So unless it's not going to affect, again, their health or safety, it's okay if they think they had turkey soup. You know they didn't. We don't have to try to fix that. There's nothing to fix. So this is a good time to go, okay, was it good? Even though you're like, I'm pretty sure she had toast. She always has toast. This is a time to let it go. I think sometimes our theme song should be that Disney movie, Let It Go, where if we all could just learn to let some of this go, we'd all be a bit easier. But it's really hard. And that's the other thing. Some of the things I'm going to share tonight, I'm going to make it seem so simple. We actually know that it's not simple and how hard it really is. So now when we think about the disease progressing, so now more boxes, sorry, before I get to more boxes falling, I want to talk quickly about the treatment. So if any of your family members are on dementia medication, and there are 3 that are funded and 1 that is funded through private care, Those medications do not cure the disease. Hopefully everybody knows that. They treat the symptoms. So in our analogy here, think of a snowplow, which many of us in Alberta at least have seen in the last month. Think of it as like a snowplow or grader. It's going down there and it's trying to keep the road clear. So it's going to push those boxes off. And it can do that in the early to mid section or stages because the boxes kind of think of them as floating on and off. So the graders come push them off and then the boxes float back on or new ones are developed. But it can kind of keep it clear. But as the disease progresses, eventually there's no place to push the boxes. Again, if you think of probably many of the streets in Alberta right now, I know in Edmonton, we have windrows taller than me. So eventually there's just no place to push anymore. And so then that road becomes blocked. So now what happens sometimes when we ask the person living with dementia what they had for breakfast or any other short-term memory, the courier driver can still go get the question, but they can't get through to that short-term memory. And so that's kind of more like when someone's in a bit more kind of that later stages, even the later middle stages, they just can't get to those short-term memories in there. So days worth of information. So again, your next tip is when you notice your family member really struggling to get short-term memory information to you, that's a sign that you need to stop asking short-term memory questions. So many of you might think, oh, but I can't do that. I need to know if they took their medication and I need to know what the doctor said the other day. And the problem is, if you know they aren't getting it sometimes, asking the question isn't actually going to help them get it. The boxes are on the road. And in that middle stage, you can kind of trial it out and see if it's a good day or if the boxes have been cleared. But eventually you're going to go, and some of the families on here will say, yeah, my mom, dad, whomever it is that you're helping support, their short-term memory is pretty much non-existent. So that's kind of what happens in that short-term memory. So I hope that's making sense to everybody there. And I think, and I can't remember, Christine, if we want people to start asking questions and you might start letting some of them through, or people can hold them and my colleagues are going to help kind of categorize them. So I'm just going to keep going. So when we get to long-term memory, I want you to think that the boxes are going to fall in the closest filing cabinets and they're going to go backwards. So if I was speaking to someone living with dementia and I don't know them very well, I'm not going to ask any questions in the last, the 2020 is only, a couple years. The 2010s, I probably wouldn't either. I'm going to try to go quite a ways back because then I'll be guaranteed their filing cabinets are open. Now, again, please remember, we really don't have 10-year filing cabinets. Just think of that as an example. So if it's somebody who's coming to the Alzheimer's Society and I don't know them, I might want to talk to them about where they were born, when they were born. Oh, and you're born in Saskatchewan. Did you grow up on a farm? Or, oh, no, you were in Saskatoon. Okay. Or, oh, you did. What was it like farming? Because that allows me as a stranger to be able to engage in some conversation. For you guys as family members, you should be able to kind of figure out which filing cabinets are blocked and which ones aren't. Now, again, I don't want anyone to go to their family member tonight and go, Mom, do you remember 2020? Like, do you remember last year? Do you remember 2021? So it's not a test, but think about what your mom likes to talk about. If you're sitting having coffee with her, does she talk about, oh, when you kids were young? Then you kind of know where that is. Does she talk about, oh, when my sister and I were growing up? Okay, that's farther back. Does she talk about, oh, when your dad was still alive? Okay, well, that's closer. So you can kind of see what people are talking about. So again, use this as a strength, because if you kind of know where you can talk to someone living with dementia in long-term memory, you can really use this for men as a good technique for distracting. You can use it as a good conversation area. But if someone's quite anxious, say you're taking them to the doctor, this is a good place to have a conversation because you don't have to worry about how many boxes are on the road and short-term memory. You can talk about growing up on the farm or growing up in downtown Edmonton and what it was like and the changes now. And really what we're trying to do is divert their focus from that worry about going to see the doctor or who's coming to my house today? Who was that who's coming? Again, home care is coming, but it's a nice way to distract with that. So you can really use long-term memory as a really kind of successful area with that. So when you think of some other challenges in these areas, so if someone's more in the middle stages, so even though they can get to some of their filing cabinets, think about a family reunion where you might think, oh, she'll know everybody. The thing is, we've aged, right? So what might be a good technique is to encourage all family members to wear a name tag and potentially wear a name tag that would say, in my case, it would say Arlene, Mavis's daughter. So then if I'm at a family reunion, at least the person living with dementia, they might not know me because, they might not have seen me since I was that tall, but they can say, oh, you're Mavis's daughter. How is she? Again, they might forget in their long-term memory that my mom has passed away, but I can still give them an answer, right? So think of it that way, is that, in that middle stage, even though their filing cabinets might be open, some of the drawers might be kind of getting stuck. In the later stages, if you start thinking about that long-term memory, people might be worried if someone's like, let's go, well, actually, that's probably even more short-term, let me take you, I'm going to give you a shower today. They might be really worried, where's this person taking me? And then they might use some of their long-term memory to say, the last time someone took me, I got a big needle, right? So, some of these areas of our brain work together, but as our dementia progresses, more and more boxes will fall on more of those cabinets going backwards. So I hope that's making sense for everybody, but it's a really good area to use while you still have those open filing cabinets, or when you can really access some of those kind of memories that they're able to still remember and even potentially converse about. As dementia progresses, of course, and we'll talk about this more in communication, but you might have to share their memories with them. So make sure you know a couple of the ones in the longer term to have a really good a good spot to have a good conversation with them. So questions in the question area says, how do you answer if they say they want to go home and they're at home? I'm going to answer, let's talk about that. So how do you answer if they want to go home and they are at home? Well, again, their file is telling them they're not at home. So us telling them, no, this is your home now, actually doesn't give them comfort. It kind of goes back to my example with Jen. Like, you didn't have that, Jen. This is what you had. And Jen might withdraw, and somebody else, Arlene, might get really stubborn and push back at you. Somebody else might swing at you if you keep it up and say, this is my home. So really what I want you to do sometimes is put yourself into their shoes, think about long-term memory and go, okay, if they don't think it's their home, what's a good reason I could say they're here? And it reminds me of a family where the gentleman actually built his home and they had been married for 63 years. So he had lived in that house for a long time. And then he started to say, I need to go home and I need to go home. So his wife called me and we had a chat. So what she started saying is, oh yeah, well, we're on holidays and we're going to go home tomorrow. So in the morning when he woke up, he knew he was home. But it was more in the evening he started asking that question. And then she would just say that because they traveled a lot. So being in a hotel would make sense. And the important thing is what she didn't say is you are at home. She let him be right in his thoughts, even though she knew they're at their home. And it just made him feel better. Oh, okay, so we're going tomorrow. Absolutely. He never remembered that she said they would go tomorrow. So it was always kind of that repetition came in, and she just answered it the same way. So you do have to figure out what to say. Now, I have to answer this question before people might say, well, but then you're lying to somebody with dementia. Well, I guess we can think of it this way. There is a technique called validation where you're validating where that person is retrieving their information. So if he doesn't recognize his home as being his home and he's lived there for 63 years, me telling him this is your home, this is your home, this is home, making him quite upset, maybe pushing his wife, from one end of the spectrum to the other. And again, not everybody pushes people, just saying there's a big spectrum out there. If you think of that, so that might be the truth, but I'm actually not giving him good quality of life, and I'm actually probably not giving me good quality of life. So using a technique like validation, going, okay, he doesn't believe he's at home, so I need to validate that for him. And so I'm going to validate him and give him an appropriate reason or answer to when we can get home. Some people say, well, that's like a white lie. Okay. We really think of it as a validation technique. So validate where they are. And we will talk about different situations where you might not fully validate that situation, but hopefully that helps you out. Another question, I'm looking for some suggestions on what to chat on FaceTime about with short-term memory being impaired, as I don't have very good responses. Like, what did you have for supper? Who visited? So yeah, kind of a bit of a struggle and hard to know what boxes are accessible. Right, so if you're really noticing that, that short-term memory isn't working, this is a good time to shift over to long-term memory. And then a follow-up to that though was, my mom will often call me daughter and say, I'm at your house, can you come get me? This usually ends up in an argument as she gets mad when I say, I can't come right now, or you're at home, mom. Usually doesn't end up being a productive conversation. Right, so again, what we're doing, and this kind of starts to creep into reasoning, but she doesn't remember that this is her home. So us again saying, kind of like when I said to Jen, oh, you didn't, no, you didn't, it actually doesn't help. And I can tell you, anytime you're kind of getting into a dispute or an argument, one person kind of raises, right? And then the next person raises, and then the next, and pretty soon you get people in a full-blown argument. So this is when we have to just go, Mom, I'm at the doctor's right now. I will come soon though. So you're not going to say I'm coming today, you're coming soon. You're not saying, yes, you're at my house, but all you're saying is, I'm at the doctor, so it's a good reason why you can't come, but I will come soon. So you're affirming, you're validating her concern. Now, does that mean you have to run over there? Absolutely not, because you're at the doctor's, right? So you don't have to go over, but hopefully that'll settle down. And then this is also a good time to go, but Mom, the doctor's not in the room yet. Mom, I was thinking about making those cabbage rolls, the ones that you and Grandma used to make, but like, was that sour cabbage or was it fresh cabbage? Again, even if you know the answer already, ask her a question that gets her, again, distracted, use that long-term memory, and then she can start talking or saying, Mom, remember the time we all went camping and Dad's pant leg caught on fire? Again, try to find memories that'll really resonate with her. So we want to not disagree. Again, kind of all the same techniques in that short-term memory. We want to use an area of her brain that she can access memory-wise, and we don't want to say no. So I hope that makes sense. When I asked my husband to shower, he says, don't tell me what to do. How do you handle that without him getting angry? I would say, instead of telling him what to do, make a suggestion. You might say, well, I'm thinking of showering. Were you going to shower first? And if he says, no, you go ahead, then go run some water, clean the bathroom, come out and say, okay, I'm all done, you can go. Because then that kind of leads up, well, you did, so he can. If he's like, no, I'm good, I've showered already, then, you can say things like, well, I think our kids are coming over, you might want to have a quick shower. But if someone's getting angry, and I was having this conversation with a gentleman yesterday, and please know, I'm not saying your family members are bears, but it's just a really good example of, if you can picture it in your head. So I always talk about poking the bear. If I, poke my spouse and he turns around and he's not my happy spouse, he's my bear spouse, and he comes back with roar, I'm not going to poke a bear again, because I'm alone on a path here, right? So I'm going to walk away slowly, like truly. And I know I'm trying to be funny about it, but really back away, go do something. Obviously, if he hasn't showered for months, give us a call and we can kind of help prompt you through it. But the other thing is sometimes we get caught up in our social things, like everybody has to shower every day or every second day. Probably your family member living with dementia isn't out working up a big sweat. Is it okay if he just takes a face cloth and cleans under his arms? So also think about different techniques we can do. If you guys are okay, I promise I'll get to those questions, but I'm just gonna go on just so we can get through some of this, and then I'll make sure though I come back to all of those questions, and I will be checking it back and forth. So as we get going, boxes will eventually fall. I think this is that's just the example of the long term. So when we start getting into that reasoning area, boxes will fall on the road. So think of the questions I asked. So one was about internet banking. Now, I'm not suggesting you should ask your family member how they feel about internet banking. But I want you to think about what is the question I could ask them that they would actually have an opinion about. Because many of our opinions are from long term. So again, don't ask them something that they just learned in 2012. Ask them something from their longer term memory. And I always give the people example, and sorry if you've heard this before. I was up doing a family visit with my colleague outside of Athabasca, and we pull up to the yard and there's like 4 or 5 farm trucks. I always say it's the typical farming. My father grew up in Saskatchewan, so that every 15-year truck was there. And when I went in, she said, "I have nothing to talk to my husband about. He's in care. What do you think I could do? I'm lost." And I said, "I have something I'd ask him." And she was like, "You don't even know him." I said, "I'd ask him if a GM is better than a Ford." And I can't remember if they had GM trucks or Fords. And she said, "Oh gosh, he would talk your ear off." I went, "Exactly." I said, "So here's the challenge for family members. She knows the answers. It's sitting right in her yard. She knows her husband's opinion on that. But that's actually something he can talk about. So for all of you guys, you should get a reward, but listen to the story again. Get him to talk about his opinion of which truck is best. Ask people their opinion. "Mom, is there enough salt in my spaghetti sauce?" Get them to have an opinion. The one thing we know is that people living with dementia have said to us, and we run programs for people living with dementia, that they feel almost like they're not valued anymore. Because when we ask someone their opinion, if I ask my colleague Jen, "Hey Jen, do you like my top?" I would ask her because I value it. Probably why I wouldn't ask my spouse that question. But if I ask my colleague Jen that, it's because I value her opinion. So when you think of that, someone living with dementia, all of a sudden they feel they have this label, and we don't ask them their opinions anymore. And yet they have them. And again, if you go back to that long-term memory, think about all the opinions they would have in there. So that's one area definitely you could talk to. So again, if you're struggling to divert the conversation, you can also go to that opinion question. As the disease progresses, so for people with more advanced dementia, again, you're going to have to use even further and further filing cabinets for that opinion question. And it may come down to, in the earlier stages or even middle stages, you can say, "Hey, is GM's better than a Ford?" And he can tell you all about it. But as the disease progresses, then it may have to be as basic. "Dad, is blue a better color for a vehicle or green?" So then he doesn't have to remember all the things about Fords and GMs. He just can go, "Well, blue's better. It's just better. I like it better." Or, blue. And he doesn't actually have to tell you about the reasoning with it. So when we think of that processing question, I think there we go. So the processing question I asked Christine was how she makes coffee. So when we think about how someone makes a cup of coffee, and Christine said, "I get my pod, I put it in, turn it on, and voila, I bought coffee." Our brains work so fast, these courier drivers going up and down, being able to do these activities of daily living, work so fast that we think that there are only that many of steps. but I'll give you kind of a quick run through. If I was going to make coffee here at work, the very first step I have to do is get up from my desk. So I have to push myself away. Now I can push by putting my hands on the desk. I can push by just pushing off with my legs. But in order to do that, I've had to send a message to my area of the brain that controls the physical movement, which sends a message to my legs, and I'm up. Now I have to command my legs to walk. And again, you might think, well, I don't think I'm doing that, but it's because our brain works so fast. Because if we don't send a message to our legs, they don't propel forward. So then when I get to the kitchen, I have to be able to identify which thing here is the coffee pot. I have to know where the coffee is. In our office, we have a couple different types. We have decaf and regular. Which coffee pot am I using? Maybe someone took the scoop out. Where do I find another scoop? How many scoops am I putting in? Where do I get the water? Does it matter if it's hot or cold? What am I putting the water in? When I get back, where do I pour that water in? For Christine, does she take the little pot off? Does she leave it on and the thing punctures it? There's so many steps that these activities of daily living, there could be up to 50 steps. So think of a person living with dementia, and they've got their little checklist. So, okay, I'm out, I'm up, I'm walking, I'm in the kitchen, I can't find the coffee. So you might find people looking into the cupboard because they just don't know what the next step is. So our tip here is, do not take over for your family member living with dementia. Try to let them do it. And you can do this by using a technique we call prompting or cueing. So to do that would be, I could say, Mom, get the one with the red lid. So now she does it, and now she's off and running and making things. But then you notice her, and she doesn't know how much water to put in. Say, there's just the two of us, put in 4 cups. So then she does that, and she comes back. So if there's someone living there, and again, there's some other criteria, right? If there's someone there at the time and we can prompt and cue them through, that's a great technique. If someone doesn't live there, you might post some instructions, but make them really simple. Don't go on and on. Like step number 1 is, a paragraph. It's got to be nice and simple. Some people color code things. So, if you want your mom to warm up food in the microwave, they put like a little sticker. So she just has to push the minute button and that's all it gets, or push the pizza button. So there's little ways you can do things like that, but help cue them. But as the disease progresses and people become more in the later stages, they're not going to be able to get all of the steps. So maybe in the early stage, they're doing 95%, maybe in the middle stage, they're doing 80% or 75%. But as the disease progresses, their ability to do those activities of daily living decrease. And then it becomes really too challenging for care partners to prompt 50%. It's one thing to prompt, a step here or there. So just know that at some point, that's often then when we look for help, whether it's home care, someone living alone, they might have to look at, the entry level of going into care. When you think of that higher level reasoning question, so I asked my colleague, Jen, how do you downsize a big house into a smaller place? And as I said, it was like, I would make a list. I like to make lists, so I make lists. Maybe Jen's going to make lists of things she wants. Higher level, because we don't do it as often, people living with dementia, even sometimes in the early stage, will struggle with this. For sure by the middle stage. So, if you're waiting for someone to pack their house to move, that might be a long time because there's so many things and so many steps to do. Or think of finances. I know I usually talk to my finance person, once a year when they update me or ask me if I want to do anything. That's another area that might be one of the ones that are harder for a person living with dementia. And then at some point, of course, people living with dementia won't be able to make those higher level reasoning, whether it's an activity or question or answer at all. So again, this is why we encourage family members to make sure your legal documents are done. And again, on a Thought Cafe, we do have a lawyer who talks about all the documents you need and some tips and hints, because at some point, someone is going to have to take over not on those higher level of reasoning, but eventually take over to give someone permission to come in and help with some of those activities of daily living. So boxes will fall on the communication center. And when boxes fall on that center, again, it might be them just struggling. It takes a little bit longer to get an answer. So they go up, takes a while, you're going, oh, are they even getting my question? They get the question and they have to drive around. But eventually, some of these areas will be affected. So in our daily conversation, we ask a lot of open-ended questions. You know, typical question at home would be, what do you want for supper? Another question is, what do you want to do if I go over to my friend's house? So what do you want to do today? Right? So open-ended means there's so many different possibilities, answers. We struggle with those, you know, if it's like, you know, where do you want to go for lunch? If I'm asking, you know, my colleague Christine that, she's going to say, I don't know, where do you want to go? And we're going to banter back and forth. So for people living, if it's hard for us, it's going to be hard for people living with dementia. So really watch the open-ended questions. Now, different options to an open-ended question would be a multiple choice where you actually give them potential answers, but don't give them 5. I struggle to remember 5 options. So, you know, again, if we were talking about, you know, going for lunch or going for dinner, you might say, well, we could go to Moxie's or we could go to McDonald's. They're both close. So I've given 2 options for someone to pick from. And someone in the early and middle stages will probably be able to pick those. Someone in the early might even say, actually, I'd rather go to Smitty's. So that's a fair way to start answering. As the disease progresses, if you notice the person's always choosing the last question, the last answer, they're always like, oh, let's go to McDonald's. Oh, let's go to McDonald's. And you're like, they used to love Moxie's. Now it's time to do a closed-ended question, which is, would you like to go to Moxie's? Yes. Would you like pork chops for dinner? Yeah. So give them that ability of yes or no. You're still giving them that option. Cross communication is an area that lots of us don't even recognize that we might be the cause of somebody expressing themselves in a way that we weren't expecting. But imagine, you know, Christmas just happened. Imagine at Christmas, you bring your mom who has dementia to a house and there's lots of relatives and we're all excited to see her and there's noise and kids are running around and there's a game going on downstairs. And think of conversations and words almost like comics where you have those word bubbles all over the place. So if I'm talking to your mom at Christmas and I'm like, oh, how do you like living at your new facility? So even if she could answer that, she sees somebody talking about the football and someone else talking about Hawaii. They usually go, but they can't. And now your mom says, well, it's in Hawaii. She might recognize that's wrong, but she's probably going to withdraw because there's just too many word bubbles out there for her. So not saying don't have someone for Christmas, but maybe have them sitting in the quiet room where, you know, the den, and somebody can come visit one-on-one, and then, you know, my cousin can come tag me off, or my sister can, and then my brother-in-law can come in. But just to have it in a way that there's one conversation and not all of the other word bubbles, if you think of that happening around them. When you think of word finding, so all of us probably at some point will have word finding problems. And lots of us will go, you know, the thing, it makes the noise. So we can often act out or give hints, you know, it trims the grass, so it's the whippersnipper. So people living with dementia in the early stage will probably have some word finding problems. In the middle stages, they'll have more words in a sentence or two that they can't get out. And really by that later stage, they might only be saying 1 or 2 words. And at some point, their communication will potentially become some garbled sounds. So they actually won't be giving words that you understand, yet they seem to be answering your question. So it would be like if you said, how are you today, Mom? And she makes a sound, you don't recognize it, but you recognize it came out like an answer. So that's where you can say, that's good. Now, if she's got a different look on her face, you might say, oh, I hope you're doing okay, because they won't be able to come up with their words. So as the disease progresses, getting those words out will become harder. And again, if you want more information on communication, we did have Tammy Hopper present. Again, she's on our Asant Cafe as a saved webinar to watch. So definitely go in and take a look at that. And then pronouns. Some people, while living with dementia, people will struggle with pronouns. So if you think of pronouns, he, she, we, they, as the dementia progresses, they're going to struggle to understand who he is, who she is, who we is. So again, just try to really make sure you use people's names. You hear me keep saying Jennifer, Christine, because we've taught ourselves that at the Alzheimer's Society, because in that way, when we have people living with dementia in our rooms, that we are used to using names so that they can follow who we're referring to. Now, a couple other areas, and then I promise I will get to those questions. A couple of other areas, I had mentioned this earlier, but boxes will fall on that physical movement, which means, you know, in the early stage, you might not see anything. In the middle stage, you might see, you know, maybe someone slowing down when they walk. In the later stage, you'll see people like, if there's a pen, and if you can't see me on your screen, when we grab a pen or a pencil, we usually kind of rest it on our middle finger and have our index finger and our thumb kind of almost pinching the pen. For someone living with dementia in the later stages, they might just put their fist around it, or they might do the same thing with the fork instead of kind of putting it between your fingers. So what happens is that their gross motor, so their big muscles, they're called gross motor muscle skills, they still work. The fine ones have a struggle to work. So you're going to see those really small moments. And that's why it's not the only reason someone would shuffle, but someone living with dementia, if they start shuffling, it's because they can use their big muscles to push their leg, but they don't have their fine detail to flick their heel and make that heel toe strike. And time is often something that family members, so again, in the early stages, there may be a little bit of time problem, there might be none. By the middle stages, someone might struggle, 20 minutes, and they might call you and you'll say, no, mom, 2 hours, I said 120 minutes, or no, I'm coming tomorrow. So they kind of forget about it. But as the disease progresses, we've had many families say, I told my mom I'd be there, at 10, and she started calling at 7 saying, where are you? So someone doesn't understand the clock at all, or the time at all, even to the point where I've had family members say, I visited my mom, I was in the parking lot leaving her place, and she called me on the phone, and I thought maybe she wanted to tell me something, and she asked why I never come to visit her. So in that short of time, her ability for understanding time was lost. And then another area that we like to talk about is called emotional memory. And you'll notice there is no highway there with that emotional memory. So the reason there's no highway is this road is never going to get blocked. So if you think of short-term and long-term memory, those are data banks, right? What I did, what I ate, who visited me, when I was born, who I grew up with, what job, when I went to school, if I had kids, all of those things, all data. Emotional memory are based on our emotions. And so all of us have emotional memories. Important to note, we have both positive and negative emotional memories. Our emotional memories tend to be based around our senses. So I'll quickly give you one of my emotional memories. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she made homemade bread, which all of us love. And if we were really lucky, she would make cinnamon buns, and not the kind that store who makes, puts cream cheese all over it. And to me, wrecks a cinnamon bun. She would make it with that crusty brown sugar syrupy. I'm almost drooling at the thought of it. So if I ever get dementia, it would be good to know, because I might not be able to tell you the story about my mom making bread and me loving cinnamon buns, but my family should know that, so they could bring in a bread maker maybe and let me smell fresh made bread. Maybe they could bring me a cinnamon bun from a farmer's market, or the Paw in Jasper. They make a good cinnamon bun still. And then I could actually taste it and eat it and see it and smell it. So doing things based around our senses. So I always end up forgetting one of our senses, but if you use all of your senses, you can usually invoke an emotion for a person. So think of music. Music is great because we all, at some point, we probably all like some type of music. So it's a good area to use all of these senses. But now remember, I said there are some negative emotional memories too. So if I had a negative emotional memory where I was maybe traumatized as a small child, And now maybe someone's coming in and they're dragging me, literally, they might feel like they're dragging me off someplace. I might be very worried about this. I might fight for my life simply because I don't understand it and it's evoking a past memory which wasn't positive. So sometimes spouses know about these potentially traumatic times, negative emotional times, but sometimes adult children don't. And so sometimes adult children are finding, some people expressing themselves in ways that they just don't understand and it seems not appropriate for the situation. So just always think, could this be a negative emotional memory? It could be the reasoning. Again, it could be any area of the brain. But just know we want to try to focus on the positive emotional memories and try to stay away from negative ones if we have that. So you guys, that's really what I wanted to talk to you about tonight, as well as though I know we have a whole bunch of questions. So I want to get to those questions. So my mom consistently sets the table for either of her parents who have long passed or her kids who you guys are growing up and living elsewhere. And she asks how come they're not coming and sitting down. She is scared that something has happened to them and why didn't they come for dinner? How do we reassure but not correct? So that's, again, a great question. And we have that in all different forms. Some of you might say, my mom just keeps asking for her mom, at the care center. She wants to know why she won't visit me. So no matter what that situation is, again, if you think your family member is in an area where, like a stage where you could sit there and say, Mom, Grandma passed away 30 years ago. You went to her funeral and I know how much you loved her and your mom will be okay. Then there's nothing wrong with that. So the only time you have to change your tip or your technique is if it's not working. So in this case, she had said, the person with the question was really saying she gets angry and gets upset, maybe not angry, but upset, but it's not a positive situation. So then that tells us, telling her the whole truth, nothing but the truth doesn't help. So then again, trying to find an answer that would make sense. So it might be, oh, your mom and dad are out visiting tonight, if they used to visit, or maybe they're out at the farm, or they're at their cabin, or they went over to a friend's house, or they're over playing canasta or bridge, but giving her a reason and then saying, kids, how kids are, they're probably just out playing, or they've stopped and ate at McDonald's or something, but give her an excuse of where you would, but not necessarily that, Mom, I am your daughter and I don't live here. That's why I'm not there. Try to find answers that work for her. And I would be amiss if I did not share this example. So it's a lady who had Lewy body dementia, and she saw an elephant looking into their condo, but their condo was in a high rise, so it was like on the 12th floor. And there were 3 daughters, and one daughter would say, Mom, how do you think that elephant got here? And another daughter would say, I don't see the elephant, but you can tell me about it. And another daughter would simply say, Mom, do you want coffee or tea, cookies or crackers? And would really try to just avoid it. And any of those techniques worked. You're fine to use them. Again, you only have to change when when the person is giving you kind of a negative response and potentially expressing themselves in a negative way, then we want to find a different way to answer that. I hope that's appropriate and answered your question. What to say to your parent when they accuse you of not coming to visit? So this is, remember when I said, we're just going to let it all go and we're just going to let them be right. So this is where we might not fully agree with them. So if they say, you took, and this is a true example, you took my remote control. Now, most of us would go, why would I want your remote control? I don't need it, and blah, blah, blah. So again, instead of reasoning it out, you can say something like, I'm really sorry you feel that way. So you've apologized. So they hear an apology. You're sorry that you feel that way. So they are hearing an apology. And sometimes that might stop it right there. If somebody said, well, you can say, I'll bring the remote back tomorrow. I thought it was okay if I borrowed it. So you are agreeing to it. So sometimes you might still want to agree, but with an apology. At other times, if somebody sees someone under their bed, you don't want to go, yep, there sure is. That's where you'll say, let's go have tea. I'll take care of it. So you're still trying to solve the problem without actually saying there's nobody there. So I hope, again, still trying to use those techniques of distracting, agreeing, but not agreeing there's someone under the bed, but saying, giving them a response that, yes, let's go have tea. I'll remove you. We'll get that person out. So I hope, hopefully that makes sense. Your dad lives in care and thinks that the nurses are trying to harm him. His words are, they're trying to kill me. There are some cords like power cables that run under his bed. They think they're connected to his pillow. And they probably are going up there. What can I say to him or do? Because he is very distressed every time you visit. So I am not someone, I sew a little bit, but I don't do many other things. But you know, you could sew or get someone to sew something that would encase the cords. Like I know technology wise, there are casings or things to grab them together, but you could almost actually hide the cords, but then they would still be able to do the work they need to do. And the other thing is, you know, if they're trying to kill you, again, of course, you want to say, no, they're not. And I'm not going to say agree with that. Yeah, they are. But really, you know, you could say, Dad, I'm going to talk to them about your concerns. Right? So you haven't said yes or no, but you're going to handle the situation. Dad, let me take care of this, okay? You can walk out and just say, Dad, again, is just thinks it. So I just told him I'm going to take care of it. So I'm just out here to say hi. So, you know, how are you? Walk back in and say, Dad, I told their boss nobody's going to do that for sure. And if they try, I will for sure call the police. So sometimes family members just need the person living with dementia just really needs to know that you're on their team and not on the care staff team, even though we are. I hope hopefully that makes sense. Do they tend to not sleep long during the night? Perhaps get up and walk around. So some people may. Some people say, "Oh, my family member's sleeping so much more," and other people say their time's getting adjusted and they're up in the middle of the night. So I don't think they understand time. So definitely talk to a physician and see if melatonin is an example of something could be used. It's an over-the-counter medication. But you always want to talk to the physician or the pharmacist, whether you're at home or in care, simply to make sure it doesn't interact. But that is something many of the physicians recommend. Sometimes having a bit more exercise to let them sleep through the day, or sleep through the evening. If someone's getting up, you know, maybe that exercise will help. If somebody's sleeping because they just, you know, they sleep more, that's actually part of the disease as the disease is continuing. So not as much of a worry. It's really hard seeing the person in the beginning stage forgetting some things and then see that when they know they're forgetting. And it's hard on both of you. It is this disease, and we often talk to family members. And again, we have someone on our Sock Cafe who talks about grief, but it really is, that's a moment of grief. And lots of my colleagues have heard me say this. You guys as care partners often talk about feeling guilty, and I didn't visit as much, and guilty I put them into care, but I actually don't think you're guilty. And it ties in with that question. That is a sadness, and I'm so happy that you said it. It's really sad for both of us. And it is. People living with dementia can see they're changing, can feel they're changing, and yet there's no way to stop it. And we're watching that happen. So always take care of yourself and really do some good grief work, do some reflection, you know, be kind to yourself, because this disease is about grief and the losses, and there are many losses. But you don't have to be guilty about anything, but you absolutely are grieving. And what do you say to someone who is accusing family members of stealing their money and getting upset? Again, this is where I'd kind of use the same technique. You know, if they're like, your brother's stealing the money, you've got to stop him. I would say, oh, Mom, really? Okay, let me take care of this. Okay, I'll handle it. Because then as long as your brother isn't, you can just say to your brother, hey, I just tell Mom I'm going to handle it. She really thinks that for some reason. And if she says he took $100, then take $100 out of her bank and come back, or have the brother come back and say, Mom, sorry, I just needed to borrow it. I'm so sorry, I won't do it again, but returns the money, wink, wink. And again, this gets back to that, but I don't want to lie. But a lie is really, we're going to validate her feelings. Again, if you feel, you can say, no, mom, he's not taking money. And your mom is like, oh, okay, I thought he was. But often what happens is if we stick to nothing but the truth, then their perception of what's happening, we're ignoring, and then we don't validate their concerns and feelings. And then they almost feel alienated from you as well. Even though the brother's stealing, they might start to feel you're in cahoots with the brother. So hopefully that makes sense, you guys. And I know there's probably many other questions. And so just to remind everybody, I know I did the presentation tonight, but throughout all of the offices in our local offices, there are staff who can answer the questions that you have posed here for me. So don't hesitate to reach out to your local office. Don't hesitate to shoot any of us an email if it's easier for you to communicate that way. But our office is open. As Christine said, we are working at home, but we are here to help you through that. And I have wonderful colleagues from one end of the province, as well as the Northwest Territories. So again, I just want to share that with everybody. And as I said, sorry, we don't have a chance to go through so many. And maybe at some point, Christine, we would just do a question and answer one where nobody presents and we could have a panel or something. But thank you everybody so much. And Christine, I'll turn it back to you.
Absolutely, Arlene. We I do apologize to the people we haven't got to yet. We have an enormous amount of questions still that people have had. So I'm gonna echo what Arlene had just said. Please always feel free to reach out to your local society office, or if you would like to send in your questions tomorrow to the Assant Cafe contact submission, we can explore that as well for people. My colleague Jen is also keeping an eye on some of the questions that maybe didn't get addressed or some of the topics. So please, if you haven't heard from one of us or you haven't had a chance to leave us a note, send one out through the email that you got the registration from. And once again, this will be or is being recorded and will be available on the cafe. I'm going to say later date tomorrow or Friday for people to review. I think Arlene had a ton of great information, so thank you again for that, Arlene. And as I said, as I always usually say, I just like to be cognizant of everyone's time in the evening. And just make a note, thanks again to Arlene. Please feel free to reach out to us. We are available to support however we can. And so with that being said, I think Arlene, if you have any last remarks, otherwise I will just sign off at this point.
Christine, if I could take just a second, I forgot I had all these things sitting beside me. So I just want to remind people,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is going to post this in there. One of the big challenges family have, especially for those of you who joined who are in the later, have family members in the later stages, that we do have things like twiddle muffs. So here's an example. We have people throughout our province who make them little pockets. They turn inside out. We do sell these. I think it's for $10 or to make a donation. We'll post in there. We also have lap blankets, activity mats, so different fabrics to feel. Some of you may be looking for ideas when someone's home alone and they can't take their pet to their care center or even their facility. There are things like this. I don't know if you can hear it. So there are those types of things. Even dollar store, the little dryer balls, sensory things. Lots of those types of things. There is a Dementia store. I'm going to show you this great little clock. It won't play, but it simply lifts up and music plays. You put in your USB in the back, but it also has pre-recorded many songs. I think there's almost 500 songs on there of kind of more, I'm going to say the older day songs, but you can always put in your disc. So again, one of the big challenges for people in that kind of later stage or even nearing end of life, sorry, my cat keeps purring here, meowing, is to have some of these things available for them. So in the chat box, you should see a website. They are on our website. and you can order them from us, and I promise I'll get them to you. Thanks, Christine. That's all I want to. And thanks everybody for joining this evening.
Yes, I'm glad you caught that, because there's a lot of great resources out there for people. So yes, I'm glad you remembered to show people that. And anyways, once again, like I had said, please feel free to reach out. As you can see, our toll-free number and our website are right on there. The Assant Cafe is also a great way to get a hold of us. And with that being said, thank you again, Arlene, for your time this evening. And we will see everybody hopefully next month for our next upcoming webinar. Thank you.